Good evening, everyone. You are very welcome to our PDST question and answers webinar, which has been specifically designed to support teachers who are new to teaching SPHE. We are delighted to be here with you all this evening. My name is Denise Dalton. I'm a full-time advisor with the PDST Health and Wellbeing team. I am here with my colleague Aisling Salmon, also a full-time advisor with PDST, and also we are here with our team leader, Lisa Noon. We are very grateful that you were taking time out of your very busy evening to attend this webinar, and we would like to thank those of you who have submitted your questions in advance. We have prepared responses to the many questions submitted via the Google Forms document. We have also collated each of these questions and categorized them under 4 different sections. Many of the questions submitted were in reference to junior cycle SPHE. Therefore, we have placed an emphasis on the junior cycle itself in our webinar. We hope that the responses offered support you as you embark on your journey as a new SPHE teacher. So, as you can see from this slide, we have categorized the questions under 4 sections. Aisling will begin with responding to the general teaching and learning questions that arose. I will move on then to speak about the ORC questions that were submitted. I'll pass it back to Aisling, who will explore assessment and reporting, and I will then move back and focus on discussing your questions around policy and planning. So that's essentially how we have structured the webinar itself. We will actually also be referencing websites and various documents and circulars throughout these questions and answers. And for ease of access, we will forward an email with these lists or with a list of these resources to you following the webinar so that you have, I suppose, an opportunity to peruse them in your own time. And within that email as well, we will also share a link to a feedback form where we would really appreciate your feedback from the session as well. So we will get started into things here, but before I suppose we delve into the answers within the 4 categories, we really want to, I suppose, just lay some foundations around important aspects of teaching and learning in SPHE, but in particular in the junior cycle space, because like we mentioned, an awful lot of questions arose regarding junior cycle SPHE. So before we begin, we would firstly like to highlight this circular to you, which is Circular 59/2021. This is a really important circular to be familiar with, especially if you're new to teaching SPHE. The circular states that the junior cycle syllabus for SPHE should now be discontinued. So that's a really important piece to just be familiar with. And as a result of that, with that discontinuation, schools have 2 options to avail of when teaching SPHE at junior cycle. The first option is to use the NCCA short course specification, which is visible here on the right-hand side of the screen, which involves 100 hours of SPHE across the junior cycle. Alternatively, a school has a second option, which can be to design a short course or use an externally designed short course using the NCC template and the guidelines on developing your own short course, which can actually be found in Appendix 1 of this circular. So really, really important circular to be familiarized with. And we would encourage you at the end of the webinar at some stage to actually have a peruse of it in your own time. So just to kind of follow on from this a little bit, here what you can see on the screen is the 2016 short course specification, which consists of a total of 45 learning outcomes. You will see the list of learning outcomes under each of the 4 strands, and the 4 strands are called Who Am I?, Minding Myself and Others, Team Up, and My Mental Health. It is expected that by the end of year 3, students will have had an opportunity to engage with all 45 of these learning outcomes. It is also important to bring to your attention that there is a new draft specification under development, and it is currently available on the NCCA website and currently open to consultation. So as you can see from the screen there, the closing date for consultation is October the 18th. So we would encourage you to have a look through the changes in this draft and to submit any recommendations that you might have following on from that perusal. So what we will move on into now is the specific questions under those 4 categories. So if it's okay with yourself, Aisling, we might start off with these. And to begin with, we are going to look at teaching and learning in SPHE/RC. So I might ask you, Aisling, a few questions, if you would be as kind to maybe flesh them out to support our new SPHE teachers who have logged in tonight.
No problem, Denise.
Brilliant, super. So one of the very first questions that came through was, how much information do we need before teaching a lesson in SPHE?
Okay, so that's a great question to start with. So when you're teaching SPHE lessons, it's important to acknowledge that you're not the expert in the room, unlike other core subjects. The SPHE classroom provides a space really for students to explore their opinions and values in a safe environment, as well as offer opportunities for them to develop their knowledge and their skills. This is achieved in an experiential manner where students are actively engaged in their learning. Of course, you'll need a foundational knowledge and level of information, but your primary role in the SPHE class is not to know all of the answers. Instead, your key responsibility is to ensure that students are engaging in topics in a safe, inclusive and comfortable environment and through a clear understanding of expectations and boundaries, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Aisling. I know we use this phrase a lot, but you're not the sage on the stage or the guide on the side. And just to be remembering that you know, you're not the expert in the room and not expected to be either. So yeah, thanks a million for that one. Another one, Aisling, is what if I don't know an answer to a question? So that ties in quite nicely to what we just mentioned there. So would you mind fleshing that one out for us, please?
Yeah, so that I suppose follows on from our previous question. So if you don't know the answer to a question, I suppose it's reconciling that with yourself that it's perfectly fine. It might be worth considering beforehand when you're going into teaching SPHE that maybe you say at the outset of your SPHE classes that you're not an expert in SPHE, and that if you don't have all the answers, possibly then when a question arises and you don't know the answer, you might consider saying, I'm not sure. So maybe rather than telling you something that mightn't be accurate, if you just leave it with me, please, and I'll come back to you in our next class. This then gives you time to read into it more, maybe speak with your SPHE colleagues and get advice basically on how best to respond to it. Also to say there's a document in the NCCA toolkit which gives you further guidance and prompts on this, and Denise is going to bring this to you later in the webinar.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aisling, for that. Another question, what topics do we need to teach in first year versus second and third year? So a really, you know, a specific junior cycle related question there.
Yeah, so Denise has mentioned that really, you know, about the age and stage of students. So there's the specification there with 45 broad learning outcomes that are to be explored by the end of the 3-year cycle. So each school really has the autonomy to choose which learning outcomes to explore across these 3 years. And really priority areas are going to vary. The learning outcomes in the specification offer a guide to SPHE teachers when they're planning their course overview. But it's important that there's a level of autonomy available. So then teachers can choose specific learning outcomes that they feel are most appropriate for the age and stage and maturity levels, of course, of their students.
Great. Thank you, Aisling, for that. I suppose it's not as simple as saying this is exactly what we do. We have to take all those different contexts into consideration when we are teaching SPHE. So thank you for that exactly. One. Another question, what are the best books to use when teaching SPHE? A really kind of common question we get, don't we, in school support and also in seminars.
Absolutely. So look, I suppose the easiest way to answer this would be like, as an advisor to the PDST, we cannot advocate for specific books that have been developed by private organisations. These haven't been sanctioned by the Department of Education. We do recommend that SPHE teachers visit the NCCA toolkit for a range of SPHE resources, which have been really carefully selected to support you as teachers in planning for your teaching and learning and assessment in junior cycle SPHE. They are not a prescriptive list of teaching resources, as each teacher or school, you know, will decide what resources are best suited to the needs of their students.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for fleshing that one out. Related again, I suppose, to resources, but how do we find resources of Gaeilge for our classes? Okay,
so there's certain Department of Education resources that are available as Gaeilge, such as the Grown Up LGBT resource, the HSE first year lessons, and many WebWise resources. They're available on our PDST SPHE website, which Denise will show you later as well.
Yeah, thanks, Aisling. So we will go through the questions, and then in the last maybe 10 minutes, I'll bring you to the website to show you where you can access all these resources. So thanks for that. Again, related to resources, how do you know what resources are best for your students?
Okay. Yeah, so look, when you're choosing resources, there are many factors that can influence what resources are best suited for our students. And again, of course, we need to consider the factors like their age, their prior knowledge when they're coming into you, and their maturity levels, their cultural background, as well as their ability levels. So the teacher, I suppose, has flexibility to judge, how particular topics should be taught, so that the learning takes place in a way that is meeting the needs and context of the students in front of them. There's a really useful document in the NCCA toolkit in the Preparing to Teach section on choosing resources. And that, I suppose, really develops a checklist for you as a teacher when you're considering resources.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Aisling. And they're such useful documents because, as we always say, I suppose in our training as well, always be considering what you need to do in advance before you step in front of your students as well. So that's an important document. Another question related to teaching and learning. How do we deal with difficult conversations that may happen in class?
Yeah, so dealing with difficult conversations or sensitive topics. So during our junior cycle RSE and our senior cycle RSE seminars and our in-school support, we really delve into how to best navigate these sensitive and challenging conversations in the SPHE space. It's very hard, I suppose, to give one answer, but how we respond really is very context dependent. However, there is a resource that can support you with navigating these conversations called Dealing with Sensitive Questions. Again, it's in the Preparing to Teach section of the NCCA toolkit, so that would be really worthwhile having a look at. And it just provides prompts for teachers to support them in this area.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for that one, Aisling. So slightly different question, but again linked to the teaching and learning space. How do I respond to students who inform me that they are transitioning? Came through in the Google form.
Okay. Yeah, so it's quite a specific question. And look, in this case, the SPHE teacher could inform the students that they'll be supported by the school's pastoral care system. Again, as an SPHE teacher, we always have to be mindful to speak to that inclusive classroom. And that includes students of all sexual orientations, gender, and just various family forms. And just be mindful not to make heteronormative assumptions. Another thing to consider is that your school may have a policy to support you in this area. So that would be worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely. Always be considering the policies in the school, whether it's your RC policy, maybe you might have an inclusive policy. We are seeing more and more schools incorporating inclusive policies into their to kind of accommodate this conversation we're having as well. So thanks, Aisling. Another question, what if a student gets upset when I cover a topic in class?
Okay, so look, if that happens, like best practice would be that you try to inform the students in advance about units of learning and topics that you're planning on exploring. This can be really, really helpful for students. It helps them prepare, gives them time to process what may come up in a lesson. And it can be really valuable as it's not always possible to preempt a trigger for a student. But however, if a student does become upset during your SPHE class, it's important that we respond and we respond calmly and sensitively. Checking in with the student, asking them possibly would they like to step out for a few moments. And it's really important if that happens that we don't try to fix the student. You can check in with them then after the lesson. And again, really, following the referral process that's there in your school, which may be referring to a tutor, referring to an SEN teacher, the chaplain, the guidance counsellor. You might decide, in that situation that it merits a phone call home to let a parent know. But it is really important to support the student, but be cognizant of your role and of your, your remit, and not step beyond that as the SPHE teacher. And if you need to refer the student, you refer them on for one-to-one support, knowing your school's referral process.
Yeah, I know that's a really in-depth response, but I think it was really important that you covered every possible avenue there as well. So thanks for fleshing that out to such detail, Aisling. And linked to this somewhat as well is how to make SPHE inclusive of all family forms, genders, lifestyles, backgrounds, cultures, and keeping it age appropriate with all of that in mind.
Okay. Building a safe, inclusive, environment in the SPHE classroom, it's essential for effective teaching and learning. Especially where there's a strong focus on discussion and dialogue. A great place to reflect on how, you know, gender inclusive your school is through there's an exploration tool developed by the University of Limerick. It's Gender Identity and a Gender Expression ebook. And this book then aims to investigate and reduce the educational inequalities that are encountered by transgender and gender diverse youths in Irish post-primary schools. When aiming to enhance the inclusivity of all from a broader perspective, where all family forms and lifestyles and cultures and backgrounds are acknowledged and embraced. Really what is key is the teacher-student and the student-student relationship. And it's not forgetting that, you know, so constantly striving to achieve a classroom where you as the teacher and the student feel safe, where they're comfortable, they feel respected and heard. And that really is the powerful foundation. You know, and when you come to our seminars, we model, you know, numerous methodologies to support, you know, and demonstrate how this can be achieved in SPHE.
Yeah. Again, quite comprehensive, but I think it was necessary to really flesh that out. And it's something that isn't born overnight. You know, we really have to consider on a daily basis, every week, how are we enhancing, working on, I suppose, creating and maintaining that safe environment at all times. So thanks for emphasizing that one, Aisling. Another question that came through was, how do we incorporate games and fun into a 1 hour SPHE class? So how to make it essentially interesting and engaging for our students.
Okay. So that's the lovely thing about SPHE. SPHE is a lovely interactive subject and interactive environment that really lends itself well to methodologies that are both engaging and fun. And it's important that the teacher chooses methodologies that are engaging and relevant and really appropriate for their students. And the best way, I suppose, of doing this is considering, you know, is knowing your students well. There's a plethora of methodologies there that are available on the NCCA toolkit. But, you know, you have to choose resources possibly from your personal toolkit or from methodologies, and consider really the personality types that you have in front of you, their interests, their ages and stages of development before you choose a methodology. My best way, I suppose, of explaining this would be if you, for example, choose to do a walking debate, which is a methodology in SPHE, and you choose to do this with a group or a class who are, you know, predominantly shy and not confident at that stage. And they don't share openly with each other, they'll simply follow each other from one side of the room to the other, as opposed to sharing their opinions. So really, you know, you might decide there, you know, to choose an activity such as a pair work or small groups, or you might decide to use something like a Mentimeter. And those type of methodologies might be better at that stage before those type of students or that class build their comfort or confidence, you know, like sharing their opinions with a larger group. So it's really considering the methodologies and, you know, the students you have in front of you before you choose them.
And I think that's a really good example of that, Aisling, as well, that, you know, we could use a certain lesson with one group and it might just land really, really well, really engaging for students. And then we go into another group, very different personality types, and it just doesn't work. It just, you know, and the walking debate is a very good example of that. Do they feel, you know, have they the confidence to actually stand by and stand over their opinions, you know, before they engage with something like this? Otherwise, you have to think about alternative ways of getting them to share their opinions. And Mentimeter, like you said, is a great way of approaching it.
And just developing their skills, and they will get there. But it's really knowing the students, knowing the dynamics in the class, knowing what you know where their skills are at, and then choosing the resources as appropriately like that.
Yeah, thank you, Aisling, for that. Not too many more questions, 2 more, I think, in the teaching and learning space. So the next one is quite specific actually to senior cycle. I think our only senior cycle specific question. Is SPHE mandatory at senior cycle is a question that came through.
Okay, yeah, so a lot of teachers ask this actually. So it's not mandatory at senior cycle, but however, we are witnessing more schools offering a timetabled SPHE class to TY 5th and 6th years to progress on their knowledge, skills and dispositions that they've developed over junior cycle. However, really important to say that the RSE element is mandatory for junior and for senior cycle. Also, just to add in there that the Education Act of 1998 states that schools have a responsibility under Section 9E to promote the moral, spiritual, social and personal development of students, and promote, you know, health education for them in consultation with their parents, having regard to the characteristic spirit of the school. So a structured timetabled SPHE programme provides that weekly space, that weekly opportunity for students to create a space and honour these responsibilities that schools have.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Aisling. So, and it's interesting, we are seeing a lot more schools offering that consistent timetabled SPHE class to TYs, fifth and sixth years in the last couple of years, which is great to see, because I suppose it allows for that consistency from junior cycle into senior cycle as well. So yeah. And I think the last question in the teaching and learning section, I suppose, is one participant just shared they're completely new to SPHE. What do I do? So quite broad, but if you want to flesh that out, Aisling.
Yeah, so look, if you're completely new to SPHE, look, taking part in the Q&A is a great start. Following on from this, we would advise you go to our PDST, Post-Primary Health and Wellbeing website, and our page, you're going to find additional recordings there to support you. We would recommend you begin with the SPHE Essentials recording. That's about 20 minutes long. And then following from this, there's a recording called Resources to Support Teaching and Learning in SPHE. So that's what I would do following on from this Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Aisling. And as you mentioned, I will take you to these websites so you're familiarized with what they look like and where you can access them. And as mentioned, we will be sharing those links in an email, so it's just makes it much easier for you than trying to vigorously write down the information during the webinar. So that kind of ties up the questions that were submitted for teaching and learning. So there's quite a substantial amount there. So we might move on to the next section, I should say, which is RSE, relationships and sexuality education. So Aisling, if you want to step in and ask, I can happily respond to those questions.
Perfect, Denise, thanks. So look, one question here is, how many RSE classes do we need to teach?
Okay, it's quite clear actually in the RSE interim guidelines that we must offer 5 to 6 timetabled periods in the year to RSE, and that's from first year right up to sixth year. So like Aisling mentioned, SPHE may not be mandatory at senior cycle, but RSE is. So we must ensure we're meeting that minimum requirement, and that can be found on page 11 of those RSE interim guidelines.
Thanks, Denise. And then do we need to inform parents when we're doing RSE?
Yeah, this is quite a common question we get. And I suppose the best way of describing this or responding to this is that parents are the primary caregivers of their child. So it is advisable to inform parents of the topics that will be explored in the SPHE classroom, and also ideally what time of the year those topics will be explored, so that they can begin, the parents or carers can begin and continue this conversation themselves with their child before and following these lessons. So it creates a connection between what is happening in the school and what ideally should be happening at home. And then I suppose to add to that, schools do have the autonomy to choose how best they would like to open and maintain this contact with parents, carers or guardians.
Okay, thank you. And then in relation to that, there's a question about parents. So can they withdraw their child from an RSE class?
Yeah, it's quite commonly asked as well in our school supports and in our seminars. So the best way, I suppose, of fleshing this out is, I suppose, to acknowledge that regard must be given to section 32E of the Education Act 1998, because that states that under which a child may not be required to attend instruction in any subject which is contrary to the conscience of the parent or parents of the student, or in the case of a student who has reached 18, the student themselves. So basically the Act does state that a parent can withdraw, yes, their child from any form of education. It just frequently, or not frequently, but it can happen that it might be the RSE classroom or the SPHE class. But just to add to that as well, parents are the primary educators of their child and important partners in the educational process that happens within schools. So while RSE is a mandatory part of the curriculum, parents or carers have that right to request their child to opt out of RSE, as it is their right with any aspect of the curriculum. So that's just bringing it back to where it's stated in the Education Act.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Spot on. So again, one person has asked here, is it okay to get speakers in to teach RSE?
Yeah, so really important circular. I will bring, I suppose, everyone's attention to is Circular 43/2018. Again, I just would encourage you to have a look at that. That circular is best practice guidance for post-primary schools in the use of programs and or external facilitators. So the circular states that external facilitators should always work under the guidance and supervision of the relevant classroom teacher, who should remain in the classroom with the students at all times and retain a central role in the delivery of the subject matter. So absence of the teacher. So the circular also states that absence of the teacher may undermine the integrity of the curriculum and the credibility and professionalism of the teacher. It may also compromise the safety of the students as well. So we must keep that into consideration. So in other words, the circular really, I suppose, emphasizes that external speakers can complement what is already being offered in the RSE classroom, ideally not replace it. Okay, so just to kind of tease that out a little bit with the use of the circular 4318.
Okay, thank you, Denise. And this one here, how much detail should we discuss with our younger students regarding drugs, consent, influences in their lives, and you know, and so on?
Yeah, so the specification that we just kind of flagged there in the slides at the beginning offers teachers a structure regarding what to explore with their students across the 3 years in junior cycle. And within the classroom, the teacher does have flexibility to judge how particular topics should be taught, so that learning takes place in a way that is meeting the needs and the context of their students, essentially. So I know you've mentioned this previously as well, Aisling, but the teacher is best placed to discern the order in which topics will be taught in response to their students' unique needs, stage of development, and the school context as well. So it is vitally important that teachers have an understanding of their students' prior knowledge of the topic in question to ensure that the lesson is appropriate to their age and the maturity levels, and ideally pitched at the right level so that optimum learning takes place. So when we speak about pre-assessment or assessment, pre-assessment is a vital component to achieving this. And pre-assessment can be achieved through, it could be a pre-quiz, a KWL, a posted activity, or even via digital tools like, say, for example, Mentimeter, which we mentioned before, or Kahoot, to check in with their learning beforehand to know how to pitch it correctly so that we're really meeting the needs of our students in front of us.
Okay, great, thank you. And then Denise, we're at the last question now for RSE. So this question here, should consent be taught at junior cycle SPHE level, given that the students are not old enough to be engaging in sex, and how should this topic be tackled?
Yeah, I think a really important question that was submitted, and one I'm glad to be able to flesh out a little bit, because I know it can be a concern with anyone new to teaching SPHE and looking at it through the lens of the RSE space as well. So what I really want to emphasize is that the weight of research shows that RSE does not lead to early experimentation. Okay, that's really, really important that I get that across. The research really emphasizes that it does not lead to early sexual experimentation. Actually, on the contrary, research shows that learners who take part in RSE at school are more likely to delay sexual activity until they are physically and emotionally mature enough to be able to manage sexual relationships, compared to those who have not taken part. In addition, children and young people are safer when they have experienced good RSE, as it gives them a language and framework for understanding what healthy relationship looks like, and it supports help-seeking behaviour if they or a friend need support or sexual health advice. So by offering RSE and discussing topics like consent, we are actually creating a space for young people to develop and hone skills that will support them later in life. So skills including assertive communication, self-awareness, self-confidence, negotiation, and also the skill of asking for help and support. These are not developed overnight. They are key components to the conversation around consent, and therefore need to be thought and developed over many years, not solely when a person reaches the age of sexual consent.
Thanks, Denise. Lots of interesting information there in the research, you know, which really validates the importance of SPHE and RSE. So thanks for that.
Thank you. So that is the questions I think that were submitted, which were specific to RSE. So will we move on into the next section, Aisling?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next section then is regarding assessment and reporting. So I will just run through some of these questions, Aisling, if you would be good enough to just tease them out for those who submitted them. So the very first one is, do you have to do a CBA for SPHE if you're not doing it as a short course? How many CBAs and what do they entail? So it's quite a lot in that question. So if you could tease that out, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do my best. So yeah, look, if the student is following the NCCA short course specification in SPHE, whether it's 60 or 40-minute class time periods, you know, there's a requirement to complete the CBA in conjunction with the assessment guidelines, which are published on curriculumonline.ie. The CBA can be undertaken in second or third year. However, it should begin, you know, after working at least 3 strands have been completed. So best practice would be that this CBA time period would not be too early in second year. Really, it's envisaged that preparation and completion then of the CBA takes place in approximately 6 hours of class time. And then just to say, for additional information on the format of the CBA and like the features of quality and all of that, they're included in the NCCA assessment guidelines.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Aisling. And I will take you to where you can find those for your own perusal later on as well. That's great. So that was just in regards to the CBA, and teasing that out a little bit. Another question that came through is, do students need to keep a reflective journal?
Okay. So look, when we're talking about reflection is key in SPHE, as it allows students to reflect on what they've learned, reflect on their own personal insights and conclusions in response to their learning. And the specification outlines that students should be encouraged to keep a personal learning diary for the duration of the short course. And the personal learning diary allows them to reflect privately on their learning. And then with the agreement of the students, some of the entries can be used to support, different learning activities, but essentially their personal learning diary is private and for the student only. So a reflective journal can provide helpful evidence really of their learning journey over the 3 years. And it may also help them then at the stage of the CBA. It may help them, reflect back, look at it, and it might inform an area of interest for them to complete their CBA, which is really useful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point there, Aisling, that the reflective journal can be a lovely opportunity for them to reflect on what did I really enjoy, what was actually interesting, what would I like to delve into a little bit more, and that can then, I suppose, be used to begin their conversations around what area would they like to focus on in regards to their project piece or the CBA.
Yeah.
So that's great, thank you. Another question regarding assessment and reporting is, what will reporting look like on the JCPA for SPHE?
Yeah, so Denise mentioned Circular 5921 at the beginning of the webinar. So, that basically states that reporting on students' learning and well-being aims to provide a picture of what students have learned about well-being and the skills that they've developed to support their well-being. So SPHE is reported on in a separate area on the JCPA, and schools will report on student achievement in SPHE following completion of a CBA in either second or third year, as we discussed earlier. So this reporting will be facilitated by the use of descriptors, which have already been developed, and these, the descriptors reflect the appropriate language of learning. Students in second and third year who are not presently following the short course can report on achievements in SPHE using the free text box and other areas of well-being, and that's the section on the JCPA. Yeah. So hopefully that's clear.
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, that definitely adds more information there, and hopefully clarifies that for our participant, whoever submitted that question. Another question then is, what assessment strategies are best to use when assessing SPHE? So what are the best strategies?
Okay, so look, the SPHE course supports a really wide variety of approaches to assessment, and it's envisaged that the most assessments in SPHE are going to be formative in nature, and students will provide evidence of their learning through multiple means of expression like oral, written, visual and art-based pieces, which lend themselves really well to SPHE. The JCT have also developed an excellent A to Z of assessment, which is designed, to support planning for assessment for SPHE teachers in the SPHE classroom. And in these contexts, students will, with their teachers and peers, reflect upon and make judgments about how their own and others' learning, has gone by looking at particular pieces of work, and then agree, I suppose, then the next steps in their learning based on feedback that they're given and they receive.
Yeah. That's super. Thank you, Aisling, for that one. And a slightly different question in regards to, I suppose, assessment reporting, but there was a question in regards to what does the inspectorate look for in SPH inspection? So if you could just maybe flesh that one out, because that's the last one within the assessment reporting piece.
Yeah, so yeah, it's important, I suppose, to point out here that we're not members of the inspectorate, so we can't answer this question definitively. However, from working with schools who have had SPHE inspections in the past, they've emphasised the importance of, having a clear, consistent plan across the junior and senior cycle years. It's also been emphasised that there's valuable benefits to having a core team that meets regularly to plan collaboratively and, share resources, share like best practice, and just support each other as challenges arise in the SPHE classroom. evidence of teachers using an experiential approach to teaching and learning in SPHE, and emphasis on building and maintaining really a safe, inclusive classroom environment where student voice is prioritised and topics are explored, that are relevant to the needs of your students. And we use the published SPHE inspection reports on gov.ie to support conversations around this topic during our school support. So
yeah, I think that's a really important point you made there around, even making yourselves aware that SPH inspections are published. And if you are interested to see what recommendations are made, it's worth having a look and having a read through those as well, and especially the more up-to-date recent ones. So thanks for that one, Aisling. I think that was our last one in assessment and reporting.
okay.
So we're on to the last section, which is questions that were submitted around policy and planning. So if you want to ask those questions, Aisling, I will happily respond to them.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll move on to policy and planning. So first one there, are we no longer using the 10 modules or the old course?
Yeah, thanks, Aisling. Now, I know we already fleshed this out a little at the beginning, but just to ensure everyone is clear on expectations moving forward, and that is actually correct. According to Circular 59/2021, which we showed on a slide earlier on, it states that in planning the wellbeing programme, schools should note that from September, so just last month, 2022 onwards, the use of the junior cycle syllabus for SPHE should be discontinued, and there are two options the schools can choose from. So option one is the NCCA short course specification, which again we showed an image of, and that would be for the equivalent of 100 hours. And then the second option is school designed or externally designed short courses in SPHE, again in 100 hours, using the NCCA template and guidelines on developing your own short course, which again I mentioned it previously, but can be found in Appendix 1 of Circular 59/21. So those two options exist. But just to flesh that out as well, that a question we tend to get is, what about current second and third years? So current second and third years may still be following the syllabus, but this will be phased out in the next few years. So hopefully that clarifies those questions that have been submitted around the traditional syllabus or the old course syllabus versus the specification.
Okay, thanks, Denise. And then the next one then is, how many hours of SPHE do we offer at junior cycle?
So again, you're going to be sick of me mentioning Circular 59/21, but it does state within that circular that short courses require 100 hours of student engagement over the 3 years of the junior cycle. And this is to ensure time is available for students to engage with all of the 45 learning outcomes and the project piece with the CBA as well. So 100 hours are required for completion, I suppose, of the short course.
Thanks, Denise. And then can you use the specification but not do a short course? Or
Yeah,
not do it as a short course as such?
Do it as a short course, yeah, thanks. So again, from September of this year, all first year students will be offered 100 hours of timetable SPHE. Therefore, they're meeting the requirements to fully engage with the short course specification. And just to add to that then as well, that the CBA is a requirement for students taking the NCCA short course specification. And therefore, these students will complete a CBA as part of this course of study. So just to flesh it out and tie it into the CBA there as well.
Okay, thanks. And then again, bring it back to the specification. One teacher has asked, do we need to cover all strands in every year?
Yeah, good question as well. So ideally, all 4 strands are covered on a yearly basis. And this reflects the developmental approach to teaching, learning and assessment in SPHE. We explore a range of topics each year and revisit them the following years in, say, second or third year in greater depth, that ideally reflects the growing age and maturity levels of our students, so that by the end of year 3, all 45 learning outcomes will be explored. But it is important that we look and find the connections between the various strands and not teach them in an isolated manner, that when we are looking at creating units of learning, that we are tying the learning outcomes together, so that it's not segmented or they're not taught in that isolated manner that might have been the case in previous years.
Yes, you're really looking for the overlap then between the strands.
Exactly. And there are plenty. When you do start looking at the learning outcomes, you will see that there is a lot of connections between them. And I suppose an example we tend to, or I would use quite frequently, is if you think about it from the conversation of mental health, we would rarely teach about mental health without thinking about the relationships that you have in your lives and the relationship that you have with yourself. So that shows an example of how mental health and ORC are so tightly connected.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. And then the next one, Appendix I, what is it?
Yeah, so I'll just provide a really a short kind of response to this, but if your school is following the NCCA short course specification, there is no requirement to use the Appendix I form. So I just want to kind of really kind of just emphasize that. If a school has a school designed or externally designed short course in SPHE, then schools can use the NCCA template and the guidelines on developing your own short course, which is referenced in that circular 5921. So yeah, but if you're following the short course specification, it's not a requirement to also complete an Appendix I.
Okay, and then the next question is particularly about policy. So in relation to the RSE policy, how often do you need to update this?
Yeah, so we really encourage the fact that you're completely new to teaching SPHE, really encourage you to familiarize yourself with your RSE policy. It should be on your website, and ideally it should be an updated version as well. There is a lot of very important information that is specific to your school context within that, and will guide you in regards to teaching in your SPHE classes. But what I will flag as well with you is there are two more circulars I'm going to mention, 27 2008 and 37 2010. Because both of them remind schools of their obligations to develop a school policy in regards to RSE and the importance of it being updated on a regular basis. But in terms of how often, ideally, a school's RSE policy should be reviewed every 2 to 3 years to reflect, I suppose, the changes that exist in this space as well. So that would be ideally what would be recommended.
Okay. And then the next one, is it better to have a core team of SPHE teachers or a larger tutor system in place?
Yeah, thank you, Aisling. So there are a variety of approaches that schools take to timetabling SPHE. We see it in particular when we visit schools during our school support. Every school has different approaches, different ways of timetabling it. But although there are many benefits to a tutor system, like say, for example, building a strong rapport with your students because you have them for, you're a tutor to them as well as their SPHE teacher, there is also many challenges associated with that structure as well. So with the development of a core team of SPHE teachers, there are actually more opportunities for the team to meet on a regular basis, to plan, to review, to reflect on their plans and their units of learning. And these opportunities where they meet also allow for space to discuss challenges that arise in the SPH classroom, but also to share best practice approaches to overcoming them. And additionally, a core team of teachers can ideally attend SPH training on an incremental basis. There's much more opportunities for them to come out for training. And finally, as well, if there is a core team, more than likely SPHE won't be your 5th or 6th subject. It will be your maybe 2nd or possibly 3rd. So you have more time to plan your lessons, and you have more contact time with your students to, I suppose, facilitate SPHE lessons. And then I suppose with that comes more confidence and comfortability with the material, with the lessons, and then with your students as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say there. So the more you have SPHE on your timetable, if you have a core team, you're building up that confidence and competence in the SPHE space.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Then one teacher here is asking in relation to planning. So what planning template should I use? And is there sample, junior and senior cycle units of learning templates to help teachers?
Yeah, so in a few minutes, I will bring into some websites, and one particular website is the JC2 website because they have developed a suggested template to use to plan across the 3 years of junior cycle. And they also have suggested templates to develop units of learning. There are no sample schemes of work or templates of a unit of learning available, as really each individual school's plan will look very different because we design it with our own students in mind. And it will depend on how SPHE is timetabled and the structure of how SPHE is taught, whether it's tutor system versus say a core team. And also, like I mentioned, dependent on the needs of your student population, because certain events might arise at different times of the year that you want to maybe correlate what you are teaching in the SPHE class with that, whether it's a wellbeing week, a friendship week, things like that need to be taken into consideration in each individual school. But what I will say is that if you're interested in, say, more tailored support with planning your SPHE schemes of work and units of learning, a PDSD advisor, myself, Aisling, or some of our colleagues can visit to facilitate a conversation with you and your colleagues, your SPHE colleagues, through our in-school support. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind that you could possibly consider applying for as well.
Great. So Denise, I know you're about to show the teachers the various websites that we've mentioned, but there's just one last question here in relation to CPD that the PDST have are offering.
Yeah, Thank you. So yes, we are offering quite a selection of seminars and webinars this term and next. We are currently at this moment in time, we're currently offering Junior Cycle RC, a 2-day face-to-face seminar. Senior Cycle RC is also 2 days, it's 2 days face-to-face seminar, which we will be offering after the October midterm. And information regarding these particular seminars will be shared with schools principals this week, so do keep an eye out for that. We'll also be tweeting about it as well, so when I bring you to our SPHE website, you'll see how to find our Twitter page as well. We're offering mental health workshops this term, and then in the new year we'll be offering our new introduction to SPHE. That's a 2-day face-to-face seminar, as well as person safety seminars and substance use evening workshops. And in addition to this, we offered our in-school support as well. And this is where we visit your school, and we offer tailored and bespoke support to you and your SPHE team. So we very much tailor it. We have conversations around what exactly you're looking for support with, and we funnel that down to meet your needs. I think that was the last question, was it, Aisling?
That's the last question now, Denise. So I think now it's over to you to show the websites.
Brilliant, thank you. So yes, so what I will do is I will take you to some websites that will, I suppose, summarize an awful lot of what we discussed when we responded to those questions. So the very first one I will bring to your attention is the NCCA website Curriculum Online, which has a specific section on junior cycle and senior cycle SPHE. I'm just for now going to bring you to the junior cycle space, because if you visit this website, you will find the curriculum specification, which we flagged on slide 2 of the webinar. The assessment guidelines are there as well to support you with that CBA we spoke about. Examples of students' work like CBAs is still to be populated, so keep an eye on that. That will be populated over time. And here, if you look at the RC SPHE toolkit, I've just clicked on that very quickly, but I just want to bring to your attention that if you click on that, you will find in this section, say the preparing to teach, all those resources that we flagged earlier on. In particular, Ashley mentioned about the dealing with challenging or sensitive questions. That's one in particular we would encourage you to have a read through, but in fairness, you could peruse them all and more than likely find something interesting and new in those to support your teaching and learning in the classroom. There's also a section on teaching SPHE RC around student voice, assessment, pedagogies, reflection, and then also the experiential learning cycle is in that too. And then finally, if you go into the resources for teaching and learning, what you will see is the NCCA have created 4 drop-down menus, essentially, with the 4 strands: who am I, minding myself and others, team up, and my mental health. And if you click on each of those, you will see that there are specific resources aligned to each of the learning outcomes, all 45. So that does help your planning to a great extent as well, and helps, I suppose, tailor your lessons to the specific needs of your students as well. So there's quite a substantial amount in that website for you to have a look at. And like I mentioned, it's for each of the learning outcomes. So if you go into Mind Myself and Others, again, you'll see plenty of resources there too. Okay, so that's the first website I wanted to bring you to. The second website is our own website. And here I'm just going to briefly bring your attention to our Twitter. So if you're interested in joining or adding us on Twitter, we will, like I said, inform you when seminars are going live, essentially. And also we share just health and wellbeing related information and resources. But if you scroll down further, you will see the videos that Ashley mentioned earlier on. So there's an SPHE Essentials video, resources for teaching and learning in SPHE, but then also for RSE, a little bit on the experiential learning cycle, and also policy review and development. And you can see there as well an RSE fundamentals resource as well. And actually you can see here the link to the NCCA toolkit for both junior cycle, and if I have anyone logging in from senior cycle or here to I suppose find resources for senior cycle, you can use this website to access that as well. But what I do really briefly want to bring you down to is the SPHE resources. Here you will also find the specification, another route to access it for both junior cycle, and then also you see the senior cycle curriculum here too. But further down, you will see specific resources on anti-bullying, on internet safety, on mental health, and further down for personal safety and RC. But under the RC section, you might remember actually referencing earlier on the University of Limerick Gender Identity and Gender Expression ebook, and you will see it here on the screen. So that is where you will access that to consider, I suppose, how inclusive your school is. It's a nice audit to engage with as part of maybe a staff meeting. The next website I want to bring you to is the JCT website. Well, I'm going to bring you to two sections of the JCT website. The first one is on assessment and reporting. So here is where you will find further information on the CBA. So you can see here an overview of the SPHE classroom-based assessment, a really nice poster that you can use with students as well, which helps them kind of decide upon what will they focus on, you know, how is it connected to the specification, what format are they going to use to demonstrate the project, and also the celebration piece is to get them to reflect on what they learned about themselves and what could be improved upon. So a nice kind of reflective poster there to use when engaging your students around the CBA. You can see also here the features of quality, which most of you are probably familiar with or have been, you know, aware of if you have been offering other short courses to students in the past, and then also the A to Z of assessment that Ashley mentioned earlier on. It's quite blurred there, but if you download it, you will see a plethora of different assessment techniques that can be used as a pre-assessment piece, either or during the classroom itself, or as a post-assessment piece. So quite a selection in there. The other JCT website I want to bring you to is in regards to planning. So this one is specific to completing your plans, because a lot of questions came through around schemes of work, around units of learning. So here is where you will find, for example, a long-term planning template for first year, second year, and third year. You will also find units of learning planning templates, which will guide you or will help, I suppose, take what you have in the overarching plan into something more concrete. So fleshing it out a little bit more so you know exactly what you're doing within each of the terms. But what I really will emphasize is if you're looking for support in that planning, in around that planning space, do consider in-school support, because we can look at it through the lens of your own school structure, how SPHE's timetables, and I suppose what the context of your school is as well. And then here is where you will find the 45 learning outcomes image as well. So you can download that. That's really handy when you're planning, so you can see the connections across the 4 strands. And yeah, you can see as well, there's PDF versions or Word versions so that you can download them quite easily to support the planning piece in SPHE. And the very last website I want to bring you to is our own PDST website, because it's important that you know how to apply for school support or how to apply for seminars if you're interested in coming out. So what I will just emphasize first of all is if you're interested in, say, coming out to any of our, say, senior cycle RC, mental health, substance use, personal safety, any of those seminar days, you do so by visiting the event booking section here on our PDST website. If you're interested in school support, you click on the school support button to the right of that. And what you will see here is a particular link to apply for school support. But what I do just want to bring to your attention is it does emphasize here that please note that applications must be approved by your school principal, because there is a limited number of areas that schools can apply for support in. So it's important that your principal is made aware if SPHE is an area you're interested in seeking support in. So those are the key websites I wanted to bring you to. And like I mentioned earlier, we will send those links out to you in an email so that you have easy access to them. But Aisling, I think that is basically the 4 sections, sections of questions, quite a substantial amount of questions. But I might just pass it back over to you, if that's okay, so we can maybe conclude our webinar. Oh, you're muted there, Aisling.
Sorry, thanks, Denise, for showing us the websites there. And as Denise said, yeah, we're coming towards the end of our webinar. So just to say, some of the questions required a longer conversation and more clarification. We would urge that if your specific question remains unanswered, please email your question in to help-and-wellbeing@pdst.ie. What will happen then is we will then follow up with you via phone call or an email. Denise mentioned there that you can apply for school support, you know, for more comprehensive and tailored guidance in teaching and learning and assessment and planning and so on in SPHE. So as we have referenced, we're going to send on the links. We'll also send on an evaluation form, and we would really, really appreciate your feedback here, just as we endeavour to support you in this space. So we really would like you to fill that in. Just to say we appreciate you attending the webinar on a Monday evening. We hope it was of some benefit to you, and just at this juncture wishing you a safe and restful evening ahead. And just to say on behalf of myself and Denise and Lisa, thank you so much for attending, and I'll end the webinar now.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Aisling.
Bye.